All right. Good afternoon, good evening, whatever time zone you're in. I know for some of you it's already tomorrow, but in any event, welcome to the weekly Mac Forum video chat. Hope that you enjoy what we have on the agenda for tonight. This is the March 6th, 2016 edition of the chat. I hope that you enjoy the information we have. Let's dive right into things here. I can't believe it's March already. First of all, I want to welcome to our newest member. My apologies if I mispronounce this. It's Amado Ramil, and welcome them. We are approaching, I believe it's 298,000 members. We're getting close to that mark. I want to welcome all of them. If you haven't yet become a member, let me encourage you to do so. Uh, that's the only way that you're able to post a question. You can lurk and read and search the forum, but in order to post a question, you need to be a member. It doesn't cost you anything to be a member. So go ahead and join the fun. And then, speaking of fun, let's get right into that, into today's happenings. We have a few things for you, uh, as well as some links to other things. First of all, I want to mention something to you. Let's dive right into uh, some of the goings on in the forum. And this first one is a tip that's a result of something going on in the forum. One of our forum members, my apology, I don't have who the thread starter was in the show notes, posted a question recently asking about the prospect of using mail, the email program that ships with Mac, to do subscript and superscript when you're writing an email. And Charlie, one of our moderators, one of my fellow moderators, pointed out that he didn't think it was possible to do that in mail. And what you had to do was to basically, if you needed subscript, superscript, and I assume it would work with strike through as well. If you needed those things, then what you needed to do was to compose your email in a word processor, Microsoft Word, text edit, something like that, that supported the format that you wanted. And then you take that and paste it into an email. Well, I was not so sure about that. I thought to myself, well, I've never used subscript and superscript in an email, but surely, as long as the Mac mail program has been around, it has subscript and superscript buried somewhere in the contents of the program. And I went poking around, and my apologies, Charlie, you were right. It doesn't do that out of the box. You've got to do a workaround, and Charlie's workaround will work. If you compose the email in another program that supports the format that you want, the formatting that you want, it's a great way to do it for a one off email. In other words, if you only use subscript and superscript once in a while, pasting it in from a word processor is a good idea. But here's another idea. When I discovered that Charlie was right. Yes, I've said that twice now. So, Charlie, I don't do that often. Uh, hey, at least I was spared saying that Van was right. But anyway, one of the solutions that I ran into, and I'm including a link to it tonight, is a way to create a style uh, to do subscript and superscript. Essentially, what you're doing is you're taking text edit, typing in some arbitrary text that you want, uh, just anything, because we're going to use this style for a lot of different things. You're going to type in some arbitrary text, select the letter, and then choose the format you want. So in this case, in this example, I would choose subscript. Okay, I'm going to go in. I'm going to format that letter with subscript, with superscript. Okay, the character now changes and it shows the subscripting, subscript or superscript, whichever one you chose. And on the one side of the text edit toolbar, you'll now see a paragraph marker, paragraph selector. Click this little paragraph marker and choose Show Styles. In the Style panel, you'll see that subscripted or superscripted letter. And right below it, you'll see the current font info and baseline and all the information that you need. Okay, you're going to leave this document style selected. Click on the Add to Favorites button. Okay, and a sheet will pop down, allowing you to name this style. Give it a descriptive name, something like subscript or superscript, whatever it does, so that you don't have any trouble remembering it. Now you've got all this selected, and what you want to do is we're going to return it to normal and do the same thing. Uh, this time, this is going to turn it off. Okay. Um, and this time it's going to be lowered. It's going to turn it off. So now you can do this. You select it when you go into mail. Now that it's defined as a style, it should work in mail. Okay. You select the text that you want to apply the style to, right click on that selected text, and from the pop-up menu, choose font and styles, and a sheet will pop up with that style that you created with your favorite styles. Uh, I know this is a little hard to follow in a verbal description. I'm going to include a link. I found that over on the Apple discussion forums. I know that quite often some of our users will complain that that forum is a little difficult to navigate. Sometimes there are complaints about the culture from time to time, but there really is a lot of useful information there, and that's just one of the tips that I've picked up over the years. Hopefully, I won't forget that when it's not something that I use a lot. Another thing that came out of a forum discussion this week, we've had some security issues discussed this week. As usual, seems like every week we have some security issue that comes up on the forum. This time, the security issue focuses upon whether on the use of firewalls, and specifically the internal firewall built into OS 10. Now, many users do not run with the internal firewall turned on. I did in the early days of OS 10, and I found that quite frequently it was alerting me about things that I didn't necessarily know about what was going on. And by that, I mean there were all kinds of little things that it would pop up as a oh, you need to keep an eye on this kind of thing, but with no real serious description as to what it was doing, what the protocol was. I mean, it gave you a rather cryptic description of the protocol, and that was about it. So that wasn't a lot of help. But one of the things that came up in this discussion, the issue essentially is, uh, do we need it if we are behind a router? Do we need the internal firewall if we are behind a router that also has a firewall? Some users don't run it if they're behind their firewall, and some users have it turned on anyway. And I will give you a good reason for turning it on. Uh, and this is not something that I had thought of. When you are behind your router, the firewall built into that router, assuming that it's properly set up, is going to catch a lot of things. And therefore, you might think that you don't need the internal firewall. But if you have a notebook and you take that note, you routinely take that notebook to somewhere like a public place that has public access, public Wi-Fi access, then you might want to turn the internal firewall on and just leave it on for no other reason than that way you don't have to worry about when you go into a local fast food restaurant or coffee house, you don't have to worry about, oh, did I turn my firewall back on? So I have a link to that discussion. Uh, Probably for me, I would suggest that if you do take your computer routinely into places where you're relying on public access or networks that you're not very familiar with in terms of what security they have in place, go ahead and activate that firewall. Give it a try. If it really annoys you, then you could always turn it off again. Speaking of OS 10 and security, one of the things that I bumped into last week, right before start of the show, so I didn't really mention it, is a description. It appears on the Intego site. It's written by Kirk McLaren, aka Kirk the iTunes guy, and it's a nice overview of some of the security features associated with OS 10, and has links to some more discussions about the robustness of some of those activities. It's got an interesting uh, description of XProtect, which is the uh, malware slash virus protection built into OS 10. The gatekeeper function. For those of you that are not familiar with this, we had a discussion in the forum about gatekeeper as well this week because someone went into their application folder looking for gatekeeper. Gatekeeper is not an application in the typical sense of the word. It is included in your system preferences in the security panel under general, and that is where you control what you want to do, the Mac to do with software that you download, okay? And how you want it to handle. Um, One of the options, you can have it, it includes things like download, how you download and install updates. The screen will look a little bit different depending on which version of OS 10 you're running. If you're in um, El Capitan right now, if you open security and privacy, you'll see in the general tab, among other things, you can change your password. You can require a password after a certain period of time. You can enable or disable automatic login. And while we're looking at that, let me just say to you, I don't care how bad you are at remembering passwords. I do not like the idea of automatic login if you're running in an admin account. Because if anyone picks up your machine, whether they get it accidentally or stealing or however they get it, if the Mac is set to automatically log into that admin account, they have admin privileges. There's a lot of things they're going to be able to do that you might not want them to do. Now, sometimes they're still going to be challenged for the password, particularly with the security improvement protocol that have come recently, but it's still not something that I personally recommend to any user really. But back to Gatekeeper. Um, at the bottom of that panel, of that general tab of the security and privacy panel, you will see three options for what you do with software. Uh, it says allow apps downloaded from, and you have three choices: the Mac App Store, uh, from basically specified certified developers, or anywhere. What's happening here is Gatekeeper is relying on security certificates from Apple certified developers who have chosen to go through that process. Now, just because a developer is not on that list and has gone through the security uh, signing process, that does not mean that they're up to something nefarious. But Gatekeeper is simply trying to give you a warning about the fact that something is about to launch and make sure that you want it. If you set it for anywhere, you won't get that warning. If you set it for the App Store, you will get that warning and you can override it and say, yes, I want to go ahead and open this. Um, Among some of the other things that are discussed in that security review, and I'll have a link to it, is sandboxing, which is a security feature that was added all the way back in Leopard. Okay. And it's been improved with subsequent OS releases. Sandboxing really is a last line of defense against a lot of problems. It tries to set up an area uh, that walls applications off from other applications, and to assert as much as possible from the OS itself. And the reason for that is you don't want some application going rogue and causing problems system wide. There's a description of journaling, and there's also a description of system integrity protection, SIP, which has been introduced as a feature with the advent of El Capitan. One of the newest security features is what's called rootless, or system integrity protection. On every Mac, there are a number of user accounts, including one that is called root. If you're a Unix user, that's roughly equivalent to super user kind of thing. And this is the one account that rules them all, to borrow Kirk's line. And I'm sure you'll know he borrowed it from Lord of the Rings. Um, and really, you can cause all kinds of havoc running as a root user. Well, with the system integrity protocol protection that was introduced in El Capitan, it prevents even the root user from accessing certain files. In other words, there are certain things that even as root user, excuse me, you can't do, and that's to keep people from wreaking havoc on their system. So that is an overview of some of the things, some of the more important changes that have occurred over the years with OS 10 security. If you are not familiar with both sandboxing and this system integrity with OS 10, 10.11, take a look at this article, particularly with system integrity protection. It breaks a couple of popular utilities because of the way that they were forced to run to do what they do. And security, system integrity prohibits that from happening. So there will be some utilities that will break. Some of them may be able to be recoded to function differently and work under the new protocols. Some of them may not. I'm not enough of a developer to deal with that one. Um, Also, oh wow, boy, we got all kinds of security stuff going along tonight here. Uh, I was going through the forum, and Ian, one of our members, posted a link to an article from Tidbits. Tidbits is Adam and Tanya Angst. Uh, that's their baby, so to speak, and very good source of Mac related information. Uh, they've been around for a long time, and I have a lot of respect for their reporting on things. I've been reading them off and on for several years. And this time, this article deals with an issue where if you are like some people and you downloaded the OS 10 installer and you either put it on your drive, you put it on an external drive somewhere in the hope that you would have it um, in the event of a failure, drive failure. So you need, let's say that you're running um, um, Mountain Lion and you know that at some point you're probably going to have a disaster. So you have a copy of the Mountain Lion installer somewhere, not as a bootable disk, but just a copy of the installer. One of the problems that you will have now is that um, these previously downloaded installers may no longer work. And this is an article from Tidbits that describes why. Once again, we owe the article was not written by Randy Singer, but Randy's the one that brought it to the attention of the gang at Tidbits. And what's happened is uh, the installers were downloaded with a security certificate that has expired. Okay, so if you happen to run that installer after the expiration date, which I believe this affects systems updates and installers that were downloaded prior to the 14th of February. Okay, uh, what you're going to have to do is delete the old installers, including those that are on any connected external drives. Log into the App Store, log into your account, navigate to your Purchases tab, and re download the installer that's gone bad on you. That will give you a new copy of the installer with a certificate that does not expire until I believe it's 2023. Okay, now there is one thing to keep in mind. Okay, Apple does not allow a newer Mac to download versions of an OS that aren't compatible with that Mac. So, for example, I've downloaded Mountain Lion, for example, before. It's in my purchases tab right at the moment. If I tried to download that, as I read that statement, if I tried to download that on my iMac, excuse me, it would not download simply because this particular iMac came out after Mountain Lion. I would have to go to a slightly older Mac, log in, and download it on a machine that's actually capable of supporting Mountain Lion. I have a link to that article in the show notes, to the Tidbits article, and also to the thread that Ian started. And special thanks to Randy. Once again, Randy is making me look like a genius. I've been reading Randy's Mac related info since really back in the days before the internet took over. Some of the books that Randy was involved in were some really good troubleshooting manuals. And when Mac using friends of mine came to me with questions, it was because, and I frequently had the answers, it was because I had often read those things cover to cover or come close to it. There were certain pages that I dog eared so many times that I think when we finally moved this last time, I got rid of an entire shelf of those books because my wife kept telling me, "You don't need the book. You can find it on the internet." And believe me, I knew why we got rid of them. I mean, it was an entire shelf of books, the majority of which were several hundred pages long. Those of you that have been around Microsoft Office for a while, you remember the old version of Microsoft Office that shipped with, I believe it was 4.2, that shipped with multiple books on Excel and the programming language and Word and all kinds of other stuff. It took up literally half of a storage shelf. Well, the other half of that shelf, plus half of another shelf, was taken up by a series of Mac troubleshooting books, several of which Randy had a hand in. So thanks, Randy, for making me look like a genius again. um, the only person that doesn't believe I'm a genius is my wife, but that's okay. All right. Now, here's some other things that have come along this week. Now that we can move away from security issues a little bit, the gang over at Cult of Mac has a discussion going about whether Apple should create an iPhone Pro. As you know, it's spring of 2016, and in the spring, with no football and baseball is about to crank up, it's not officially spring yet, but this time of year, the tech heads' fancy turns to speculation about the next iPhone. It probably won't be released till October, but you're already seeing um, some speculation about what iPhone 7 might entail. And along with that is some speculation about an iPhone Pro. And so far, the only speculation that I've seen is that the Pro might include two higher quality rear facing cameras, um, to rival that of a great many of the DSLRs on the market, and that it might be aimed at those professional types who don't want to carry both a phone and a camera. And there's a discussion over at Cult of Mac about whether that's a good idea, what impact that would have on flagging security, uh, or flagging iPhone sales, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I'll link to that. It's an interesting read. I don't plan on speculating much about the current or the coming iPhone because that's an instance where I am almost never right on that. So we'll leave that for you. And one other thing, I know this comes from the website of a vendor, but it's actually a piece of useful information. The Pad and Quill gang that you might know from making iPhone cases, among other things, has a blog called The Bindery. And one of the things they have on there is some suggestions for how to um, disinfect your iPhone, your iPad, in 4 easy steps. Okay. The first one really is a warning. Okay. And I'm amazed we have to say this, but step one says water will break your iPhone. Yes, uh, that's true. Um, and step two says um, household cleaners are mini Zambonis. Okay. It points out the damage that these household disinfectant wipes uh, can do to your iPhone screen, uh, making it non functional in some cases, not just because of the potential for liquid getting into the phone, but because of some damage that's actually done to the screen itself under certain circumstances. Basically, the chemical that kills the bacteria can also kill your iPhone screens. So, uh, what they are suggesting now, a lot of people will use rubbing alcohol, which Apple does not recommend. even though some of their stores and some of their authorized resellers have cleaners that use rubbing alcohol. But one of the differences is a lot of those cleaners are actually a mixture of distilled water and rubbing alcohol in a 1-to-1 ratio to cut down on the those of you that use it from time to time know that rubbing alcohol can be a little stringent. You can tell it'll really clear your eyes out real good if you get a good whiff of it, um, especially if you are a devotee of the green stuff that I grew to despise as a kid, because every time you cut your arm or scraped a knee, somebody came with that bottle of green alcohol, and the only thing I could say for it is is that it was less painful and annoying than the some of the other alternatives. But they have some interesting thoughts in that blog about using your about cleaning your iPhone, your iPad. Thought it would be a good thing to include those steps in there. You want to be careful, of course, no matter what you're using, to be aware of where that liquid is going. You want to use as little of it as possible, preferably none. That's a good uh, reason, by the way, to have a good screen protector on your device, because if need be, and it gets too scummy, you can remove the screen protector and replace that, as opposed to trying to replace a damaged screen that you inadvertently damaged by getting liquid of some sort on it. Uh, we get a lot of posts in the forum on a regular basis about damage done to either laptops or uh, iDevices because of liquids, beer, wine, alcohol, other forms of alcohol, cleaning fluids that have gotten on the device. These generally are not in any way good things to have on your screen. And before I close out the show tonight, I want to point out uh, that someone else that I cite rather frequently in the show, Rob Lefevre, who is also over at Cult of Mac, has some thoughts on closing up and getting rid of malware on your Mac. And first, one of the things that he suggests is closing all pop up ads when they start appearing, close out all those pop up ads by clicking the little red dot in the corner of the ad. Some of them do not have that, but clear out all those pop up windows. Don't click on anything in the window. Don't click on any buttons in the window if you can avoid it, because sometimes they go to places that you don't want to go to, uh, or try to do things that you don't want done. Okay, and if you see a message that says, um, do not show more alerts from this web page, you can check that box before closing the pop up ad. Uh, there are I like to have the pop-up blocker in Safari turned on. Usually do have that turned on. It's cut way, way down on the number of pop-up ads that I see. Although once in a while, some of them will get by, and they are actually, most of the ones that get by are actually pop under ads. They popped up underneath the window that I'm viewing, and the only time I see them is when I start closing windows for one reason or another. You can block by blocking pop-ups. That blocks a lot of this malware. It doesn't get all of it, but it does block some of it. Rob's article has descriptions for how to block them in both Safari and in Chrome. Another tip that Rob has for uh, getting rid of malware is periodically check the extensions that are installed. Make sure that the ones that are there are ones that you've put there or that you know what they do. I only have at present a handful, by handful, I do mean probably 4 or 5 max extensions in my Safari installation at the moment. I just don't add a lot of extensions to any browser that I'm using. I know that can make things kind of inconvenient at times, but I have a habit of I'm checking even as we're saying this just to see how many I have. I was right. I have 3 at the moment. AdBlock Plus, Ghostery, and Click to Flash or Click to Plugin rather. That kills a lot of different things. So those are the ones that I have. I've had a couple of others. I do need to reinstall the stuff for Dragon Dictate. I have that. I had that in previously, but that's about it as far as the extensions that I use on a regular basis. I encourage you to check that periodically. Make sure that you know what those extensions do, where they came from, and make sure that you keep an eye on that. You don't want things trying to sneak in there. It's harder to sneak things into OS 10, but there still are a lot of people who click on things without really reading the dialog boxes. I know because I've done it before. I've actually erased data and the like from various computers because I wasn't clicking carefully. Uh, I once erased probably 15 or 20 pages of notes in college because I wasn't paying attention to which dialog box I clicked on. I was trying to create a backup copy and I accidentally erased the wrong disk. And you will find these. Rob also mentions how to manually get rid of some of this stuff. The path names of the folders that you're likely to want to look at. But for a lot of users, they're finding malware bytes is a good alternative. I've used it on the PC. I have it on my Mac. That used to be Adware Medic, and I've run it a few times to kill 1 or 2 pieces of malware. I've been very fortunate. I'm a fairly boring web surfer. I go to a relatively small number of sites, so I haven't encountered a lot of malware so far, but every once in a while, as I'm surfing different places looking for the answer to something, I'll come across a site that just sends my radar through the roof, wondering about, okay, this might be a good candidate. And I'll link to, although I won't take time to talk about it tonight, I'll link to another Cult of Mac article with some tips for the mobile edition of Safari. And that's going to just about do it this week, guys. We've had a lot of security related information in this particular episode. Hope you like the mail tip with the style sheet and some of the other things that we talked about tonight. I hope that you'll join me again next week. Of course, we'll be back with more Mac news, tips and tricks, and anything else that comes to mind. Until next week, this is your host, Sylvester Rock, aka Sly Dude on the forum. And I will see you through the week on the forum and back here next Sunday for the weekly Mac Forum video chat.